Hey, do you think we are at the end of the story? Do you think this is where it's heading to? Ram kills Ravan and then it is the end? Possibly, possibly. The book certainly doesn't have much left. Let's see if we can finish it in this particular segment or not, right? So, next day, Ram fought in a chariot. Indra, the king of gods, sent his own charioteer Matali to drive Ram into battle. Matali steered and maneuvered the chariot to Ram's advantage, allowing Ram to attack Ravan from all sides. The gods and heavenly sages and divine beings gathered in the sky to watch this great battle as the two opponents attacked each other with weapons that had never been seen before. So evenly matched were the skills of the two warriors that some of the weapons bounced off each other in the air and others fell harmlessly into the sea, and others failed to hit their mark. The sky grew dark. The wind howled as they fought on, neither gaining the upper hand. Ram called upon all the weapons that Vishwamitra had taught him to summon, but the Rakshas king had their equal. If Ravan used arrows that turned into snake, Ram used the weapon of Garuda, the king of the birds. If Ram used the weapons of Varuna, Ravan's shining spears cut through their nooses. Slowly, signs of defeat began to appear. Ravan's flagstaff that carried his battle banner was sliced in half by Ram. Fiery comets whizzed close to the earth, the sea churned, and the tides rose. Vultures and birds of prey wheeled in the air. Everyone who was watching the battle knew that these omens boded ill for Ravan. Use Brahma's arrow, shouted Matali to Ram. The time is now. Ram pulled the splendid arrow out of his quiver. It had been given to him a long time ago by sage Agastya Muni, who had told him that he could use it only once and for a great enemy. Use it now. The incomparable arrow held the wind in its feathers, the sun and the moon in its shining tip, and the earth in its shaft, the power of doomsday fire in its flight. Ram pulled the bow back to the fullest extent and concentrated on the mantras that fueled the arrow. He held his breath and released the arrow, knowing that it carried Ravan's death with it. The arrow thundered through the air, and all living beings in the three worlds shuddered at the sound. Leaving the air, the arrow thudded into Ravan's chest and stabbed his heart. With a great cry, the mighty king of Rakshas fell to the ground, his 10 heads humbled. A rain of flowers fell from the heavens as the celestial beings rejoiced at Ravan's death. The remaining Rakshas ran back to the city, while the monkeys and bears leaped and clapped and shouted and sang. Ravan's wife came pouring out of the palace, and Mandodari, his chief queen, flung herself onto Ravan's broken body and wept. Let us anoint Vibhishan, king of Lanka, with water from the ocean in the presence of his people, said Ram wearily to Sugriv. And then let Ravan have a royal funeral. Wow! After Vibhishan's coronation and Ravan's funeral, Ram's thoughts turned to Sita. That's a bit late, but okay. He called Vibhishan and said, bring Sita here. Vibhishan was surprised that Ram wanted him to bring Sita into such a public place. But he obeyed him and went to fetch Sita from the grove. Anxious to see her beloved husband, whom she had thought of night and day, Sita did not stop to wonder why Ram had not come to see her himself. Without changing her clothes or adorning himself as a princess should, she followed Vibhishan to the battlefield. Ram was waiting there, surrounded by his allies and friends. Sita gazed at Ram, her eyes filled with love. Ram had hardened his heart. He said to her, I have killed Ravan. I have won this war that was fought to get you back with the help of my friends. I have restored my reputation and the glory of my family. You were abducted by a Rakshas and lived in his kingdom without me. You are a beautiful woman. Ravan must have touched you while you were his prisoner. I cannot take you back. You are free to go where you want, Sita. Hmm. Let's see where this goes. Tears, tears. Tears filled Sita's eyes, but she spoke with a quiet anger at Ram. How can you talk to me like this? You forget that I am a daughter of Janaka, that I was born from the earth. You speak to me as a low and common man who would speak to his woman. It is not my fault that I was abducted. I have thought of nothing but you all the time that we have been apart. My heart has always been with you. How little you know me, Ram, even after all these years. Sita lifted her head with pride and said, build a fire for me, Lakshman. My husband insults me in front of all these people. There is nothing left for me to do but walk into the fire. Ram turned away from the pain and anger in his brother's eyes. Lakshman built a fire for Sita, who bowed to the gods and said, I have never thought of anyone but Ram. But if I am speaking the truth, let fire, eternal witness, protect me. With her mind calm and her spirit serene, Sita stepped into the flames. Even and the monkeys and bears began to wail. The gods Brahma and Shiva and Indra and Varuna and all the others came down from their sky in their bright chariots and surrounded the fire. Oh, Shiva comes down. Ram bowed to all the gods and stood before them with his palms joined. Brahma said to him, you are the greatest of all the gods, Ram. How could you let Sita walk into the fire like that? You are the creator of the worlds. You are the sun and the moon. You are time and everything else. How could you humiliate Sita as if you were an ordinary man? I know myself only as Ram, the son of Dashrath, stammered Ram. Tell me who I am. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Brahma spoke again, more gently. You are Vishnu. You are Narayan, the holder of the conch, the wielder of the discus. You were never born and you will never die. You are the three worlds. You are the universe. You contain the sun and the moon, the wind and rain, the oceans, the earth and the sky. Wise men search for you, but you are beyond understanding. Everything is in you, and you are everything. You are the best of us all, Vishnu. The gods beg you to protect the worlds from Ravan, and so you took the form of a man who was born as Dashrath's son. These marvelous monkeys who fought by your side are the sons of the gods and other celestial beings. Sugriva is the son of Surya, the sun god. Hanuman is the son of Vayu, the wind. Oh, look, this picture of Sita and her Agni Pariksha. Strong. I like how the Fire is flowing all over, and the contrast of her hair. Sita looks disappointed, to be honest. So do we all at this stage of the book, aren't we? Does one really need to be a god to make a decision like that? The gods have been with you all this time. Now your work here is done. You can return to heaven whenever you like. But what does that mean? Thought Ram, bewildered. Am I God or am I a man? How do I act in this world? Do other people see me as God? Am I always right or do I make mistakes like other humans? How do I live the rest of my life now that I know that I am a God? At that moment, Agni, the god of fire, rose up from the flames carrying Sita in his arms. Her skin glowed golden. She was dressed in fine ornaments and silks that shone with the burnished hues of flames. Here is your wife, Ram, said Agni. She has always been faithful to you. She held you in her heart, and she remained pure and chaste. Take her back and honor her as she deserves. Ram took Sita's hand and said to all the gods, I always knew that Sita, daughter of Janak, had been true. I never doubted her heart for a single moment, but she had to be proved innocent for the world to see, so that there will never be any suspicion about her character and her behavior. Hmm, it is what it is. She had always loved me, and I have always loved her. She is as much a part of me as the rays of light are part of the sun. The monkeys and bears and Rakshas cheered as Ram accepted Sita. The god smiled, and then Ram said, if you are pleased with me, then I ask you for one more thing. Let all the brave monkeys and bears who died during the terrible war be brought back to life. At once, the dead forest dwellers were revived, their wounds healed, and their bodies made whole. They were reunited with their brothers and friends. Only the monkeys and bears, mind you, not the Rakshas. Which is sad in a way, right? Come on. Shiv came forward and said to Ram, it is time for you to return to Ayodhya. 14 years have passed. Your exile is over. Reclaim your kingdom from noble Bharat and rule Ayodhya wisely and well. Show the world what it means to be the king, Ram. Establish dharma on earth before you come back to your true form in heaven. It is part of your purpose to ensure that humans know the difference between right and wrong. It shall be as you say, said Ram, bowing low with his palms joined. The god showered blessings in the form of flowers on all of those who were present and went back to their homes, well satisfied with the way things had turned out. I thank every one of you for all your help and support. Victory in this war and the defeat of Ravan could not have been accomplished without you. It is time for me to go home to my beloved city and my kingdom, to my mothers and my brothers and my people, said Ram. The monkeys and bears must also return to their homes and their families. Vibhishan, prepare for our return. I leave Lanka in your safe hands. I know that with you as their king, the Rakshas will never torment the three worlds again. Ah, Ram, Vibhishan sighed. I wish to be with you when you are crowned king of Kosala. I wish to see your beautiful city and share your joy. Please let me come with you. Sugriv and Hanuman joined their palms before Ram and said, "We too would like to see Ayodhya and meet your people. Take us with you, dear Ram." Ram smiled and embraced each of them. "Come, my loyal allies, you are as dear to me as my beloved Lakshman. Come and celebrate with me as I am crowned king." Vibhishan clapped his hands and summoned Pushpak, Ravan's magic chariot. It was made of gold and it had comfortable seats. It flew through the air on its own accord and carried its passengers wherever they wanted to go. "This splendid chariot is yours, Ram," said Vibhishan. "It will take us all to Ayodhya. After that, it will come to you whenever you think of it and take you where you wish." Amidst great rejoicing, Ram, Sita, and Lakshman climbed into Pushpak along with their friends and allies. "Hanuman, you go ahead and tell Bharat all that has happened. Tell him we are on our way home," said Ram. The great monkey rose in the air, waving farewell with his tail, and as he sped towards Ayodhya with the good news, he flew over mountains, forests, rivers, and soon in the distance he saw Bharat's encampment outside the city. He landed gently next to Bharat. He noticed that Bharat sat not on the throne, but on the ground. "I am Hanuman," said the monkey. "I am Ram's messenger, and I am here to tell you that he has killed Ravan and won Sita back. Let me tell you everything that happened in these 14 years since he left your city." Tears of joy flowed through Bharat's eyes as he embraced the monkey. Tell me everything that my dear brother experienced in his exile. But first, let me give orders for his coronation. Priests must be summoned. The sacred materials must be gathered. Those are his sandals on the throne. I have only ruled in his name. I cannot wait for the return of the kingdom to him." After making sure that his peoples were preparing for the ceremony and that the queens of Ayodhya had been alerted, Bharat led Hanuman to the shade of a tree and listened eagerly as Hanuman recounted his own adventures and those of Ram, Sita, and Lakshman. Meanwhile, Pushpak fell, flew through the skies, and Ram pointed out all the places they had traveled over to Sita. She listened to his stories about the bridge the monkeys had built, where they had lived in Kishikanda, the palace where noble Jatayu had been killed, the place, sorry, where noble Jatayu had been killed. Sita covered her face when they passed over the Dandaka forest from which she had been abducted, but she smiled at the pleasant memories of her days in Chitrakoot. Before long, they could see the river Sarayu in the distance, and they knew Ayodhya would be within a short time. Joyful citizens had gathered to welcome their beloved Ram. But the first thing Ram did, along with Sita and Lakshman, was to honor his mother, all three of them. Then he held his brothers close, his silence saying more about his happiness at their reunion than his words ever could. Soon the royal priest Vasisht arrived with the other Brahmins and they led Ram over to the enclosure where he would be crowned. In the presence of kings and other leaders, Ram was anointed with water from the sacred rivers, and amidst the chanting of prayers and blessing, he became the ruler of the kingdom of Kosala. The celebration was accompanied by gifts, giving of gifts, land, and cows, and money and food. The city hummed with joy for days, and even the humblest of homes overflowed with abundance. I like the way it flows. The humblest of homes overflowed with abundance. The monkeys and Ram's other allies stayed on after the coronation, enjoying Ayodhya's many pleasures and basking in Ram's company. When it was finally time to go, Ram showered them with jewels and other gifts. Sita placed her necklace of pearl around Hanuman's broad shoulders, and The monkey shone like the moon surrounded by a garland of clouds. Hanuman wept when he had to leave Ram's side. But the king embraced him and said, "Dear Hanuman, you shall live as long as my story is told in the world of men. In that story, you shall always be by my side, my faithful companion, and the most magnificent of all monkeys. There shall never be another like you." Ram's forest allies departed, as did the great kings and mighty Rakshas who had come to attend the coronation. The magical Pushpak rose into the air and disappeared beyond the clouds, promising to return whenever Ram thought of him. Ram settled down to rule his kingdom as his ancestors had done before him. There was no sickness or hunger. People performed their duties and lived comfortably into old age. The fields and farms provided abundant grain, and markets were full of goods to buy and sell. City and country dwellers prospered together, and there had never been a happier time. Ram kept track of his people's joys and sorrows and responded to their needs quickly and efficiently. But there was even more joy ahead as Sita was soon pregnant, and everyone in the kingdom waited impatiently for a heir to Ayodhya's royal lineage. One day, in his splendid court, Ram asked his ministers and informers, "Tell me, what are my people saying? Are they unhappy? Is there anything more I can do for them?" Ministers smiled and shook their heads, reassuring Ram that all was well. One of his informers raised his hand and asked permission to speak. "Lord, I have something to tell you, but I cannot say it here in court," he said, his eyes on the ground. "Speak freely, my man," said Ram. "There is nothing that a king should hide from his advisers." Without raising his head, the man said, "Forgive me for what I have to say, but the town people are gossiping. They say that they do not understand how you took Sita back when she had stayed so long in the house of another man." Ram's brow darkened and he dismissed the court, asking only his brothers to stay behind. Finally, he sighed and said, "I must banish Sita from the city. The people must respect their queen. She cannot be the subject of their suspicion. Tomorrow, Lakshman, tell Sita you are taking her to visit the wives of the sages in the forest. She has missed them and she will be pleased to see those gracious women again. Leave her in the forest near the hermitage of sage Valmiki. He is a friend of our father's and he will take care of her." Whoa. Lakshman stared at Ram, horrified at what he had just been asked to do. He shook his head and started to speak, but Ram silenced him. "I have made up my mind. Please do not make this any harder than it is." He turned on his heel and walked away, alone to his private chambers. The next day, Sita was full of excitement as she climbed into Lakshman's chariot. "Look, Lakshman," she said with a smile, "I am taking fine clothes and perfumes for the women and sweets from the city for everyone else. They are so kind to me when I was there." Lakshman bit his lip and said nothing as he mounted the chariot. Swiftly they rode out of the city. Lakshman remained silent and grim. "What's the matter with you today?" asked Sita. "There's a dark cloud hanging over you. Are you missing Ram?" "You'll be back with him soon enough. Enjoy the weather. It's lovely to be away from the city and under the open skies. Let's stop when we get to the river. We can refresh ourselves there. Lakshman rode on. He stared at the road, blinking away his tears. When they got to the river, Sita dismounted and went to the edge of the water, stepped in to wash her face. As she bent over to drink from her cupped hands, Lakshman turned the chariot around and sped away, leaving Ram's wife alone. Sita called out to him, "Where are you going, Lakshman? We have further to go before we reach the sage's home." She watched in horror as the chariot disappeared into the distance. It was a while before she realized she had been abandoned in the forest. She collapsed, weeping on the floor, unable to think of what to do or where to go. How did this happen? She wondered aloud. What did I do to deserve this? Ram must have ordered this. No one would dare to do this to me without his consent. Oh, what shall I do? Where shall I go? She sobbed. Now the whole thing which bites me is not that she's worried about where, why, what. It's this line. How did this happen? She wondered, what did I do to deserve this? What did I do to deserve this? Ram must have ordered this. It's that painful realization that her, her Ram must have ordered this. No one else would dare to do this to me without his consent. Sita had not noticed, but there was a group of people playing nearby, a group of children playing nearby. They were from Valmiki's hermitage, and they ran back to tell Sage that a lone woman was weeping by the river. The sun was beginning to set. Valmiki hurried to the river bank and saw Sita. With the power of his austerities and his divine eye, he knew immediately who she was and what had happened to her. "I am Valmiki," he said gently as he approached her. "I was a friend of King Dashrath, and I know that you are the wife of his son Ram. Come with me. The women in my hermitage will take care of you. Make your home with us." Sita gratefully accepted the hand and he held out to her and followed the old man to his settlement. Sita stayed in the forest hermitage, surrounded by the love and kindness of the sage's people. In a few months, she gave birth to twin boys. Valmiki blessed them and named them Love and Kush. She promised to care for them and to teach them and to treat them as he did his other students who lived in the hermitage. The boys grew and brought their mother much happiness. But there was a sadness in Sita's heart that she could not share with her sons. She never told them who their father was. Though the boys looked like princes, they lived like forest dwellers, wearing simple clothes and eating roots and fruits. From Valmiki, Love and Kush learned the sacred texts. The sage noticed that they had sweet singing voices, so he would often teach them songs and poems that he had composed. One day, the sage saw a hunter shoot one of a pair of birds. Wow, it's been a while. You sure you want to finish this? Not too many pages left. Just give me a few more minutes. Let's finish this book. I think we are coming to the final conclusion. Yeah. So one day, the sage saw a hunter shoot one of the pair of birds. The female bear bird cried out in grief as she saw her mate fall dead to the ground. Valmiki was moved by the bird's pain as he cursed the hunter. He realized that he had spoken in a new poetic meter. When he reached his hermitage, he sent for Love and Kush. Come, sit by me. I have just created a new meter, and I want you to learn the poem that I will compose in it. It shall be a poem like none other, and you are the ones who will make it take it into the world. The boys brought their simple musical instruments and listened carefully as Valmiki began to recite the new poem. So basically, he made a new poem. Wow, a new meter we never heard before. Valmiki was moved by the bird's pain as he cursed the hunter. He realized he had spoken in a new poetic meter. Meanwhile, the city of Ayodhya, Ram continued to rule as before. Months and years went by. Sometimes a shadow would fall across Ram's face and his eyes would dim with unshed tears. But no one knew what was in his heart. He never ever mentioned Sita's name again or let anyone talk about her in his presence. One day the royal priest came to him and said, Ram, you have made your kingdom prosperous and powerful. It is time now for you to perform a sacrifice of the monarchs. A king of your stature and reputation needs to show the world he has no rivals. Let us invite all the reigning kings from around the world and great sages as well. Ram agreed, and even though his heart was heavy as he knew that for the sacrifice to be complete, he would need his queen by his side. Invitations were sent far and wide, and the city was soon filled with people from different lands. Along with kings and the sages came dancers and singers and actors and acrobats and jugglers and soldiers and traders and farmers and priests. Everyone wanted to be present at a sacrifice which would go on for weeks and would involve gifts of clothes and monies and foods from the king. Even the monkeys and bears and rakshas who had fought so valiantly when with Ram came back to enjoy the celebrations. As the sacrifice went on, the sage Valmiki arrived there with his companions and students who settled down in the enclosure for sages. Love and Kush had come with him, and Valmiki instructed the boys to recite the new poem whenever they could. Boys sang their teacher's beautiful poem here and there among the people. Before long, everyone was talking about them. Boys soon found themselves performing for the king. Ram listened enchanted, entranced, as the boys sang the story of a great loyal lineage, its joys and sorrows, its triumphs and tragedies. One day he asked the boys, whose story is this? Who are you and where did you learn this poem? Who is your teacher? The boys bowed before the king and said, this is your story, Ram. We are the students of sage Valmiki, and he brought us to this sacrifice. Ram listened with great attention and called his brothers and ministers, come, 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 as well as his allies and friends to listen with him. As the poem went on, Ram and the others who were listening learned that the boys who stood before them were the sons of Sita. Ram's heart beat faster as he quickly said, go to your teacher and say to him, if Sita is innocent, let her come. Let her come and prove herself in front of this great assembly. Look, look, look. They're going to get Sita back. Wow. Let's see what happens. The boys carried the message back to the sage. Valmiki arranged for Sita to be brought to the city the next day. He led her into the sacrificial enclosure. Sita kept her eyes on the ground as she walked past the kings of the world and the assembled sages. A silence fell as Valmiki's voice rang out. This is the woman you abandoned in the forest, Ram. You feared the gossip of your people, but your wife has always been innocent. These beautiful boys are yours, Ram. I brought them up in the forest hermitage for you and taught them the story of their royal ancestors. Accept Sita as the virtuous woman that she is and claim your sons for Ayodhya. Ram joined his palms and bowed to the sage. I have never doubted Sita, and I know those boys are my sons. I had to abandon her to please my people. Let her prove her innocence once more, here before the citizens of Ayodhya and the kings of the world and the great sages. Then they will all believe in her virtue, knowing that, knowing that something stupendous was about to happen. The gods came down from the heavens. Vayu released a gentle breeze that was laden with perfume as Sita stepped forward in aesthetic robes. If I am innocent, let the goddess accept me into the earth, she whispered. The ground in front of Sita's feet opened up and a glittering throne appeared, borne on the jeweled hoods of two magnificent Nagas. Heavenly music filled the air as Sita mounted the throne. The Nagas slipped back into the earth, taking Sita with them. A great silence fell. No one moved. Not a blade of grass stirred, not a leaf drifted to the ground. It was as if time itself had stopped. No one knew how long this lasted. But when they returned to their senses, they all knew that Sita had gone forever. Ram too awoke, as if from a trance. He was distraught when he realized that his beloved wife had left him. His brothers tried to comfort him, but Ram was beyond solace. He embraced his sons and with his arms around their shoulders, he led them away from the sacrifice. Ram gave instructions for a statue of Sita to be made from the purest, finest beaten gold. From that day onward, the statue of his beloved queen was placed next to him at all formal ceremonies and rituals. After Sita's departure, King Ram continued to discharge his duties as before. Ram was surrounded by his advisors, great sages who were experts in dharma, and led the king through his duties. His sons were trained in the arts of kingship, learning from their uncles and ministers how to use weapons and how to manage political and social matters. Ram settled his brothers and their sons in neighboring lands, but he kept his beloved Lakshman close by his side. They never spoke of Sita, but Lakshman knew that Ram had changed, that he was no longer the man he had been in the forest. Ram could not get used to life without Sita. His loneliness increased with the years, and even though his sons made him happy, his smile never reached his eyes. Although he performed all the royal duties wisely and well, everyone knew that he nursed a broken heart. One day, a messenger arrived, asked to see Ram. I have something to tell you, but we must not be interrupted while we are together. No one must hear her or see us. If anyone interrupts us, even with a good reason, they will die. Ram called Lakshman and asked him to guard the door while he spoke with the stranger. When they were alone, the messenger said, I have come from Brahma. Ram, your time on earth is done. Return to heaven now and be united with the divine Vishnu again. I have been thinking the same thing, replied Ram. I have done all I can for Ayodhya, and I have fulfilled my duties as a father and as a king. Yes, it is time for me to return to the gods. I shall see my beloved Sita again in heaven. Meanwhile, the sage Durvasa came to Ayodhya and marched straight to the palace. No one dared stop him because he was known for his temper and the terrible curses that he unleashed, even on innocent people. Even on innocent people. He said to Lakshman, open the door, I want to see Ram. I am hungry and I need a meal. Lakshman replied that Ram would not be disturbed. All right, said the sage. If you do not let me in, I shall curse you and your family and this kingdom and this entire land. It is your choice. Without hesitating even a moment, Lakshman entered the room. He knew the consequences of the choice he was making, but he was sure that it was better that he alone died rather than having rather than have the sage's curse affect the entire kingdom. Ram came out and honored the sage and gave him a wonderful meal. The sage was satisfied and went away. And then it dawned on Ram what had happened, that it was Lakshman who had entered the room and that it was Lakshman who would be hit by the messenger's curse. He collapsed on his throne, his head in his hands. Ah, Lakshman, my Lakshman. He said, even you leave now. Will fate show me no mercy? My brother, said Lakshman softly, this was meant to be. I too must return to heaven. I shall wait for you there. Lakshman left the palace and walked swiftly to the banks of Sarayu river. There he lay down and concentrated his mind. He controlled his senses and slowly he ceased to breathe. Flowers rained from heaven as noble Lakshman's life on earth came to an end. With even Lakshman gone, Ram made preparations for his own departure to heaven. He sent for Bharat and Shatrughan and their sons, and he summoned his allies and friends, including the monkeys and bears and the Rakshas ruled by Vibhishan. In their presence, he divided his kingdom equally among his sons and bound his allies to them by oaths of loyalty. Then, on an auspicious day, Ram woke before dawn. He bathed and dressed himself in soft white silk that gleamed like moonlight. He calmed his mind and, led by priests, carried the sacred fires. Ram entered the river Sarayu. The town people followed him with their families and children. They were weeping quietly because they knew that they would never see their beloved Ram again. The monkeys and bears and rakshas and kings from neighboring lands also joined the solemn procession to the banks of the river. The sun rose and Ram's face shone golden as he walked into the cool waters of Sarayu. The citizens of Ayodhya saw the gods standing in the sky, holding out their arms to him. Brahma's voice rang out, come, Ram, and in a dazzling flash of light, Ram went back to where he had come from. But his story, but his story remained on earth to be told over and over again by many people in many languages, for it is one of the greatest stories of the world of humans has ever known. The end. And thank you for listening the story with me. It did move me a lot at the end. Goodbyes always are difficult. Well, I am super proud of you. Stay strong. Always. Always fight for what is yours. You will get it in the end.